What would you do if saving your worst enemy's family was the only way to redeem your darkest mistake? Let us know in the comments what country you're watching from. My name is Nalnish, and for 3 years I have carried the weight of a sin that no amount of prayer to the Great Spirit could wash clean. In the Apache tongue, my name means he who works, but the work I had done in the town of Millbrook would haunt me until my dying breath. That September night in 1871, as I crouched in the shadows near the O'Brien homestead, I was not there as a warrior seeking vengeance or plunder. I was there because I had seen the smoke rising from the direction of the isolated cabin, and something deep in my soul compelled me to investigate, though I knew I risked my life by venturing so close to white settlements. The small cabin sat in a clearing about 5 miles from Millbrook, Arizona territory, surrounded by oak trees that whispered secrets in the desert wind. It was a modest dwelling, built by hands that knew honest work, with a small garden where corn and beans grew in neat rows. A woman lived here with her child. I had observed them from a distance many times during my wandering, though they had never seen me. As I approached through the darkness, I could hear sounds that made my blood run cold. The crude laughter of men, the crash of furniture being overturned, and worst of all, the terrified crying of a child. "Please," came a woman's voice, thick with an Irish accent and raw with desperation. "Take whatever you want, but don't hurt my daughter." "We'll take what we please, lady," growled a man's voice, harsh and mean, "and maybe we'll take you too if you're nice to us." I moved closer, staying in the shadows of the trees. Through the cabin's single window, I could see the scene inside, and it filled me with a rage that burned hotter than the desert sun. 2 men in dirty clothes and worn hats had invaded the home. The larger one, with a scraggly beard and cruel eyes, held a rifle trained on a woman who stood protectively in front of a small girl. The woman was perhaps 30 years old, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins, and a face that, even in her terror, showed the strength of someone who had faced hardship before. The child behind her was no more than 6 years old, with her mother's red hair and eyes wide with fear. She clutched a rag doll against her chest, her small body trembling. "Jake, look at this," said the second man, younger and thinner, as he rifled through a wooden box. "She's got some nice things here. Silver candlesticks, a gold locket." "That was my husband's," the woman said, her voice breaking. "It's all I have left of him." "Was?" Jake laughed coldly. "What happened to him? Apache get him?" The woman flinched as if struck. He died in the war, fighting for the Union." "Well, ain't that noble?" Jake sneered. "Died fighting for the darkies, did he? Shame he left such a pretty widow all alone out here." I watched the woman's face transform from fear to defiance. "Get out of my home," she said, her Irish accent making her words sound like a battle cry. "You've taken what you came for. Leave us be." "Oh, we ain't done yet, lady," Jake said, stepping closer. "Billy, tie up the kid. We don't want her seeing what comes next." "No!" the woman screamed, throwing herself forward to protect her daughter. Jake backhanded her across the face, sending her stumbling backward. That was when I saw it. As the woman fell, her sleeve rode up, revealing a distinctive scar on her forearm. A scar I recognized because I had caused it. The memories crashed over me like a flood, 3 years ago, during the raid on Millbrook. I had been younger then, full of rage over the death of my own family at the hands of white soldiers. I had followed the war party into town, my heart burning with the need for revenge against any white person I could find. We had swept through the town like a plague of locusts, taking what we wanted, burning what we didn't. I had kicked in the door of the general store, where I found a woman and her small daughter cowering behind the counter. The woman had tried to protect her child, just as this woman was doing now, and in my blind fury I had struck her with my knife, leaving that distinctive scar on her arm. But something had stopped me from killing them. Maybe it was the way the little girl looked at me, not with hatred, but with a strange kind of understanding, as if she knew I was hurting too. Or maybe it was the woman herself, who even in her terror had whispered, "Please, she's just a baby." I had left them there, alive but traumatized, and fled with the rest of the war party. But their faces had haunted me ever since. The woman's courage, the child's innocence, they had planted a seed of doubt in my heart about the path of revenge I had chosen. Now, 3 years later, I was watching the same woman and child face a different kind of terror, and I knew that the Great Spirit had brought me here for a reason. "Mama!" the little girl cried as Billy grabbed her roughly. "Don't you touch her!" the woman shouted, struggling to get to her feet. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth where Jake had struck her. "I'll touch whatever I want," Jake growled, advancing on the woman. "Been a long time since we had us some fun." I had seen enough. Moving with the stealth that had made me a feared warrior, I slipped through the cabin's back door. The two men were so focused on their prey that they didn't notice me until I was already inside. "Let them go," I said quietly in English, my voice carrying the authority of someone who had killed many men. Both bandits spun around, their eyes wide with shock and fear. Jake's rifle swung toward me, but I was faster. My knife flew from my hand, embedding itself in his wrist. He screamed and dropped the weapon. "Apache!" Billy shouted, fumbling for his pistol. "Yes," I said, drawing my tomahawk. "And you will leave this place now, or you will die here." The woman stared at me in shock and recognition. I could see in her eyes that she remembered me, the Apache warrior who had scarred her arm 3 years ago. But instead of screaming or fainting, she pulled her daughter closer and watched to see what I would do. "You're that savage from the Millbrook raid," Jake snarled, clutching his bleeding wrist. "I remember you." "And I remember you," I replied, though it was not entirely true. All white men had looked the same to me in those days, but I knew his type, the kind who preyed on the weak and defenseless. "Billy, shoot him," Jake ordered. But Billy was young and scared, and his hand shook as he tried to aim his pistol. I moved like lightning, my tomahawk catching him in the shoulder. He dropped the gun and fell to his knees, screaming. "Take your friend and go," I told Jake. "If I see you near this place again, I will kill you slowly." Jake helped Billy to his feet, both men bleeding and defeated. "This ain't over, savage," Jake spat. "We'll be back with more men." "I will be waiting," I said simply. After they stumbled out into the night, I turned to face the woman and child. The little girl was crying softly, and the woman held her protectively, but she was watching me with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you save us?" I looked at the scar on her arm, then met her green eyes. "Because 3 years ago I was a different man, a man full of hatred and pain. I hurt you and your daughter, and I have carried that shame ever since." She touched her scarred arm unconsciously. "You're him, the Apache who—" "Yes, I am the man who marked you, and I have come to make amends." "How can you make amends for what you did to us, for what your people did to our town?" "I cannot undo the past," I said, "but I can try to protect your future." The woman studied my face for a long moment. "What's your name?" "Nalnish." "I'm Margaret O'Brien, Maggie, and this is my daughter, Rose." Little Rose peeked out from behind her mother's skirt, her tear-stained face curious despite her fear. "Are you really an Apache?" she asked in a small voice. "I am." "Are you going to hurt us?" I knelt down so I was at her eye level. "No, little one, I am here to protect you. But Mama says Apaches are bad." "Some are," I admitted, "just as some white men are bad, but not all of us, just as you and your mother are good." Maggie's eyes widened. "You speak English very well." "I learned from missionaries when I was young, before the war came and changed everything." "What war?" "The war between your people and mine, the war that killed my family and filled my heart with darkness." Maggie's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss. I know what it's like to lose family." "Your husband?" "Yes. He died at Gettysburg, left me and Rose alone in this world." We stood in silence for a moment. Two people who had been enemies, now bound by shared loss and an unexpected moment of mercy. "Those men," Maggie said finally, "they said they'd come back. They will try, but I will not let them hurt you again. Why would you do that? Why would you help us? I looked at the blood on the floor, the overturned furniture, the terror in the eyes of the child. Because I have done enough harm in this world. It is time I tried to do some good. But your Apache, your people and mine, are at war, yes. But war does not have to live in every heart, not anymore. As I spoke these words, I felt something shift inside me, like a stone being rolled away from a cave entrance. For 3 years I had wandered the desert, neither fully Apache nor white, carrying the weight of my crimes and the emptiness of my loss. But standing in this little cabin, looking at this woman and child I had once terrorized, I felt something I had not felt in years. Hope. Will you let me help you? I asked. Will you let me prove that I am not the man who hurt you 3 years ago? Maggie looked at her daughter, then back at me. I don't know if I can trust you. Then let me earn your trust. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin's windows. In the distance, I could hear the sound of horses approaching. Jake and Billy were returning, and they had brought friends. They're coming back, Maggie whispered, clutching Rose tighter. Yes, I said, checking my weapons. And now we will see if an Apache warrior can truly redeem himself by protecting those he once sought to destroy. Chapter 2. The sound of approaching horses grew louder, and I counted at least 6 riders by the rhythm of their hoofbeats. Jake had been true to his word. He had returned with reinforcements, and they were coming fast. Blow out the lamp, I instructed Maggie, who moved quickly to extinguish the flame. The cabin plunged into darkness, but my eyes, accustomed to night hunting, adjusted quickly. What do we do? Maggie whispered, her voice tight with fear. You and Rose will hide in the back room. Whatever happens, do not come out until I tell you it is safe. But what about you? I will do what I must. Rose tugged at my buckskin shirt. Will you be okay, Mr. Nalnish? The innocence in her voice, the way she had already begun to trust me despite everything, struck me like a blow to the heart. I will be fine, little flower. Go with your mother now. As they disappeared into the back room, I positioned myself by the window, studying the approaching riders. They had spread out in a semicircle around the cabin, a classic tactic for surrounding prey, but they were white men, used to fighting other white men. They did not understand how an Apache warrior fought. "O'Brien!" Jake's voice called out from the darkness. "Send out that Apache and we'll leave you be." I smiled grimly. He was lying, of course. These men would not leave witnesses to their night's work. "I ain't leaving without his scalp," shouted another voice. "That savage cost me a finger." Moving silently, I slipped out the back door and into the darkness. The cabin sat in a small clearing, but the trees came close enough to provide cover. I had learned to move through forest like a ghost, and these men would never see me coming. The first rider was positioned behind a large oak tree, his rifle trained on the cabin's front door. I approached from behind, my moccasins making no sound on the forest floor. My hand covered his mouth as my knife found his heart. He died without making a sound. The second man was easier. He was smoking a cigarette, the glowing tip marking his position like a beacon. I took him with my tomahawk, leaving his body in the undergrowth. "Charlie, you see anything?" Jake called out. When Charlie didn't answer, I heard Jake curse. "Spread out, boys. That savage is out there somewhere." But fear was already creeping into their voices. They had expected to find a trapped Apache, not a hunter, stalking them in the darkness. I moved like the wind, striking where they least expected. The third man died when he turned to investigate a sound I had made deliberately. The fourth fell when he came too close to the tree where I waited. "Jake!" One of the remaining men called out, his voice high with panic. "Jake, where are you?" "I'm here, damn it! Keep your voice down!" "They're all dead, Jake." "Charlie, Tom, Miguel, Billy, they're all dead." "That's impossible. There's only one of him." "You don't understand," the man's voice cracked. "This ain't just any Apache. This is a ghost, a demon." I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Fear was a weapon as powerful as any knife or tomahawk, and these men were already half defeated. But Jake was different. He was cruel and heartless, but he was also experienced. He had not survived this long by being stupid. "Listen to me," Jake called out, his voice carrying a new tone of calculated cruelty. "I know you can hear me, Apache. I got something here that might interest you." I froze, every instinct screaming danger. "See? While you were playing games in the woods, I sent Billy around to the back of the cabin. He's got the woman and the little girl. You want to see them again? You better come out with your hands up." My blood turned to ice. In my focus on the men outside, I had forgotten about Billy, who had been wounded but not killed. He could have circled around while I was hunting the others. "Don't believe me?" Jake laughed. "Billy, let the Apache hear the kid." Rose's terrified cry pierced the night. "Mr. Nalnish, help me!" The sound of her voice, small and frightened, calling for me to save her, broke something inside me. This child, who should have hated me, trusted me to protect her, and I had failed. "There's a good girl," Jake called out mockingly. "Now, Apache, you got 30 seconds to show yourself, or Billy's gonna start hurting them real bad." I had no choice. Emerging from the trees with my hands raised, I walked slowly toward the cabin. Jake stood in the doorway, his rifle trained on me, while his remaining companion, a nervous-looking man with a scar across his cheek, kept watch. "That's better," Jake grinned. "Billy, bring them out here where I can see them." Billy emerged from the cabin, his wounded arm in a makeshift sling, pushing Maggie and Rose in front of him. Rose was crying, and Maggie's face was pale with terror, but she was trying to comfort her daughter. "Please," Maggie said, her voice breaking, "let Rose go. She's just a child." "Shut up," Jake snapped. "I ain't done with you yet." He looked at me with satisfaction. "You know, Apache, I was gonna just kill you quick, but after what you did to my boys, I think I'm gonna make you watch while we have some fun with your lady friends here." "They are not my people," I said quietly. "I am their enemy." "Is that so?" Jake's grin widened. "Then you won't mind if we—" "But," I continued, "I have given my word to protect them. And an Apache warrior's word is sacred. Your word don't mean nothing to me, savage. It means everything to me." Jake studied my face, trying to read my intentions. "You're planning something, ain't you? Billy, if he so much as twitches, shoot the kid." "No!" Maggie cried out, pulling Rose closer. "Please," I said, looking directly at Jake, "I will make you a bargain." "What kind of bargain?" "Single combat, you and me. If I win, you let them go. If you win, you can do whatever you want with all of us." Jake laughed. "You think I'm stupid? I got you outnumbered 3-1. "You think you are brave," I said, letting contempt creep into my voice. "But you hide behind women and children. You are not a warrior. You are a coward." His face flushed red with anger. "I ain't no coward." "Then prove it. Face me like a man." "Jake, don't listen to him," the scarred man warned. "It's a trick." "Maybe," Jake said, never taking his eyes off me. "But I always wanted to kill me an Apache with my bare hands." He handed his rifle to his companion. "Keep them covered, Scar. If the Apache tries anything, shoot all 3 of them." Jake pulled out a large knife, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. "I'm gonna enjoy this, savage. Gonna take my time carving you up." We circled each other in the small clearing, 2 predators sizing each other up. Jake was bigger than me, with longer reach, but he was also slower and less disciplined. He fought with rage, while I fought with purpose. He lunged first, his knife slashing toward my chest. I stepped aside and struck him in the ribs with my elbow. He grunted but kept coming, swinging the knife in wide arcs. "Stand still and die," he snarled. "Your anger makes you weak," I replied, ducking under another wild swing. This enraged him further. He charged like a bull, trying to tackle me to the ground. I used his momentum against him, stepping aside and driving my knee into his stomach. He doubled over, gasping. "Jake!" Scar called out nervously. "Finish him!" But Jake was already finished. As he struggled to catch his breath, I moved behind him and applied the sleeper hold I had learned from a captured cavalry officer years ago. Jake fought desperately, but within moments he went limp in my arms. "Jake!" Scar screamed, raising his rifle. But I was already moving, using Jake's unconscious body as a shield. Scar's shot went wide, and before he could reload, I had thrown my knife. It took him in the throat and he fell backward, his rifle clattering to the ground. Billy, panicked and wounded, tried to grab Rose as a human shield, but Maggie was faster. She hit him in the head with a piece of firewood and he crumpled to the ground. In the sudden silence that followed, I could hear only the sound of our breathing and the distant cry of a night bird. "Are you all right?" I asked Maggie and Rose. "Yes," Maggie whispered, holding her daughter close. "Yes, we're all right." Rose looked at me with wide eyes. "You saved us again. I promised I would." "But why?" Maggie asked, the same question she had asked before. "Why would you risk your life for us?" I looked at the scarred arm that I had marked 3 years ago, then at the frightened but brave woman who had protected her child at the cost of her own safety. "Because you showed me mercy when I deserved none. Because your daughter looked at me with trust instead of hatred. Because I have spent 3 years running from the man I was, and tonight I finally found the man I want to be." "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we must decide what kind of future we want to build." As dawn began to break over the Arizona mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I realized that my journey of redemption had only just begun. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt hope stirring in my heart. "Will you stay?" Rose asked, taking my hand in her small one. I looked at Maggie, seeing something in her eyes that I had not expected, not fear but possibility. "If your mother will have me," I said. "We'll see," Maggie said softly. "We'll see." But in her voice, I heard the promise of a second chance, and that was more than I had dared to hope for. Chapter 3. 2 months had passed since that terrible night, and the small cabin in the Arizona wilderness had become something I had never expected to find again. A home. The bodies of Jake and his men had been reported to Sheriff Crawford as bandits killed while attempting to rob the O'Brien homestead. The sheriff, a practical man who cared little about how justice was served as long as it was served, had asked few questions. The territory was rough, and dead bandits were considered a public service. What surprised everyone, including myself, was how naturally I had settled into this new life. Each morning I would wake before dawn to hunt or tend to the small improvements I was making to the property. I had repaired the roof, reinforced the walls, and built a proper smokehouse for preserving meat. My hands, once used only for war, had learned the peaceful arts of construction and cultivation. Maggie had been hesitant at first, understandably so. The idea of sharing her home with the Apache warrior who had once terrorized her was not easy to accept. But as the days passed, she began to see that I was no longer the man who had hurt her 3 years ago. "You're different," she told me one evening as we sat on the porch, watching Rose play with a wooden doll I had carved for her. "When I first saw you in town during the raid, your eyes were full of hatred. Now they're peaceful." "Hatred is a fire that burns everything it touches," I replied, "including the one who carries it. I carried that fire for too long." "What changed?" I watched Rose as she made her doll dance, her laughter like music in the desert air. I saw what my hatred had created. I saw the fear in a child's eyes and knew that I had become the monster I thought I was fighting. "But you saved us. Twice." "Saving you saved me," I said. "It gave me a chance to be the man I should have been all along." Our conversations had become easier over time. Maggie was an intelligent woman, educated despite her humble circumstances. She had been a teacher before marrying her husband, and she had a natural curiosity about the world that made her ask thoughtful questions about Apache customs and beliefs. "Tell me about your family," she said one day as we worked together in the garden. "The ones you lost." It was a subject I had never discussed with anyone, but something about Maggie's gentle manner made me want to share the burden I had carried alone for so long. "My wife was called Ayana," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It means eternal flower in our language. She was like sunlight, always laughing, always finding joy in small things." "How did you meet her?" "She was from another band." We met at a trading gathering when we were both young. I knew from the first moment I saw her that she was meant to be mine. You loved her very much, more than life itself. She was pregnant with our first child when the soldiers came. Maggie's hand found mine in the soil. I'm so sorry. The soldiers said they were looking for raiders who had stolen cattle. But they did not ask questions. They simply started shooting. Ayana was trying to protect the other women and children when I stopped, unable to continue. You don't have to tell me, Maggie said softly. I held her as she died, I continued, needing to speak the words aloud. She made me promise to live, to find a way to heal the hatred in my heart. But I broke that promise. I let the hatred consume me. Until now. Rose had overheard part of our conversation and came running over, her face serious with childhood concern. Mr. Nalnish, are you sad? I picked her up, marveling at how easily she had accepted me into her life. Sometimes, little flower, but not when I am with you and your mother. Good, she said, wrapping her small arms around my neck, because you're part of our family now. Her innocent words hit me like a physical blow. Family. It was something I had never dared to hope for again. Rose, Maggie said gently, we've talked about this. Nalnish has his own people, his own life. But he lives with us, Rose insisted. And he takes care of us. And he tells me stories about the animals and the spirits. That makes him family. That evening, after Rose had gone to bed, Maggie and I sat by the fire, each lost in our own thoughts. She's right, you know, Maggie said finally. About what? About family. It's not always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice. I looked at her, trying to read the expression in her green eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that these past 2 months have been the most peaceful I've known since my husband died. Rose has never been happier, and you've given us a stability and protection that I never thought we'd have again. But I am Apache. You are white. Our peoples are at war. Our peoples, yes, but not us. We've chosen a different path. What kind of path? She moved closer to me, her hand touching my cheek. A path where an Apache warrior can find redemption in protecting those he once hurt. Where a lonely widow can find love again in the most unexpected place. Where a little girl can have a father who will teach her about courage and honor. You would truly accept me as part of your family. I already have, she said simply. The question is whether you can accept us as part of yours. I took her hand, feeling the strength in her fingers, the calluses from hard work, the simple gold band she still wore in memory of her husband. I am afraid, I admitted. Of what? Of being happy, of forgetting my wife and the life I lost, of failing to protect you the way I failed to protect her. Loving us doesn't mean forgetting Ayana, Maggie said gently. And protecting us doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It just means you have to try. And if people find out, if they discover that you are living with an Apache, then we'll face that together. All of us. It will not be easy. There will be those who cannot accept what we have chosen. When has anything worthwhile ever been easy? I thought about her words, about the journey that had brought me to this moment. From warrior to wanderer to protector to family man. It seemed impossible, and yet here I was, sitting by a fire with a woman who had every reason to hate me, but had chosen love instead. Nalnish, she said, using my name the way she might say a prayer. I need you to know something. When I look at you now, I don't see the man who hurt me 3 years ago. I see the man who has spent every day since then trying to make amends. I see the man who risked his life to save us. I see the man who carved a doll for my daughter and taught her to see the spirits in the wind. What do you see when you look at me? I see the man I want to spend the rest of my life with. The words hung in the air between us like a bridge spanning 2 worlds. I thought of Ayana, of the promise I had made to her, and realized that she would not have wanted me to live forever in the shadow of her death. She would have wanted me to live, to love, to find happiness again. Margaret O'Brien, I said formally, Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will." We were married 3 weeks later by Father O'Sullivan, the Irish priest who had known Maggie's family back in Boston. He was a progressive man who believed that love transcended the artificial boundaries that men created, and he performed the ceremony with genuine joy. Sheriff Crawford stood as my witness, along with Doc Hartwell, who had treated my wounds during a skirmish with bandits the previous month. Rose, dressed in her best dress, carried wildflowers and declared herself the flower guardian of our wedding. The ceremony was simple but profound. I wore traditional Apache wedding clothes that I had made myself, while Maggie wore her grandmother's dress altered to fit. We exchanged vows in both English and Apache, promising to honor each other's cultures and traditions. "Do you, Nulnish, take this woman to be your wife, to protect and cherish her in sickness and in health, in times of plenty and times of want?" Father O'Sullivan asked. "I do," I replied, placing a turquoise bracelet I had made on Maggie's wrist. "I promise to be the man she deserves, to protect her and her daughter with my life, and to honor the trust she has placed in me. Do you, Margaret, take this man to be your husband, to love and support him through all the challenges that life may bring?" "I do," she said, placing a silver ring on my finger. "I promise to stand by him, to help him continue his journey of redemption, and to build a life together based on love, understanding, and respect. Then, by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Arizona, I pronounce you husband and wife." As we kissed, sealing our union, I felt the last of the darkness that had lived in my heart for 3 years finally lift. I was no longer Nulnish the warrior or Nulnish the wanderer. I was Nulnish the husband, the father, the man who had found redemption in the most unlikely place. That night, as we lay in our marriage bed, Maggie traced the scars on my chest with her finger. "Do you think we can really make this work?" she asked. "I think," I said, pulling her close, "that we already have." 6 months later, Maggie told me she was pregnant. As I placed my hand on her growing belly, feeling the life that stirred within, I thought about the circle that had brought me to this moment. From death to life, from hatred to love, from enemy to family. "What will we name the baby?" Rose asked, her hand joining mine on her mother's stomach. "If it's a boy," Maggie said, "I was thinking we could call him Michael after Father O'Sullivan." "And if it's a girl?" I asked. "Ayana," she said simply, "to honor the woman who taught you about love." I felt tears on my cheeks, and I was not ashamed of them. "She would have liked that," I said. "She would have liked both of you very much." Dulum, as the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, I realized that my journey of redemption was complete. I had found what every man searches for: a purpose, a family, and a love that transcended all boundaries. The Apache warrior had become a husband and father. The man who had once brought fear and violence had learned to bring peace and protection, and the heart that had been broken by loss had been healed by the power of forgiveness and love. In the distance, I could hear the song of the wind through the desert, and it sounded like Ayana's laughter, blessing the new life I had found. The warrior's redemption was complete. And thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of redemption and love, a story that reminds us that it's never too late to change, to heal, and to find our true purpose. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let us know in the comments what touched your heart the most. See you in our next Wild West adventure.